Sarah Martinez had always known she was different from other teachers at Lincoln High School. While her colleagues discussed lesson plans during lunch breaks, she quietly checked the security of classroom windows and noted potential escape routes. Her military background as a Navy SEAL wasn't something she advertised. Most people couldn't imagine the petite woman with kind eyes had once navigated dangerous missions in hostile territories. The morning of October 15th started like any other day. Sarah arrived early, unlocking her classroom and arranging desks in perfect rows. She taught advanced biology to seniors, and today's lesson focused on the human nervous system. The irony wasn't lost on her that she would soon demonstrate firsthand how quickly the body's fight-or-flight response could activate. Marcus Thompson slouched into third period with bloodshot eyes and clenched fists. The 18-year-old had been spiraling for weeks. His parents' messy divorce, mounting college rejections, and a recent breakup had created a perfect storm of rage and desperation. Other teachers had noticed his increasingly aggressive behavior, but none knew about the violent fantasies that consumed his thoughts. As students filed in, Sarah noticed Marcus's agitated state immediately. His jaw was tight, his breathing shallow, and his hands trembled slightly. Her SEAL training had taught her to read body language like a survival manual. Every instinct screamed danger, but she maintained her calm exterior while mentally preparing for whatever might unfold. The lesson began normally. Sarah explained how electrical impulses traveled through neurons, using colorful diagrams and interactive demonstrations. But Marcus wasn't listening. He stared at her with growing intensity, his mind replaying every perceived slight, every moment of embarrassment in her class. In his distorted reality, she had become the symbol of everything wrong in his life. 20 minutes into class, something inside Marcus snapped. Sarah was explaining synaptic transmission when she noticed him rise slowly from his desk. His movement was predatory, deliberate. Other students continued taking notes, oblivious to the brewing storm. But Sarah's heightened awareness, honed through years of military service, recognized the shift in atmospheric pressure that preceded violence. Marcus's chair scraped against the floor as he stood fully upright. His breathing became audible, rapid, and shallow. Sarah's peripheral vision caught the subtle changes in his posture as his weight shifted forward onto the balls of his feet. She had seen this exact stance before in combat zones when enemy fighters prepared to attack. Time seemed to slow as Marcus began his charge. His face contorted with rage, lips pulled back in a snarl that revealed gritted teeth. Students in the front row finally noticed something was wrong and began turning in their seats. A girl named Jessica started to scream, but the sound came out in slow motion, stretched and distorted. Sarah's body responded before her conscious mind could process the threat. Years of intensive military training had created neural pathways that bypassed rational thought. In moments of extreme danger, her muscles coiled like springs, and her breathing automatically shifted to the controlled rhythm she had learned in combat situations. Marcus covered half the distance to her desk in 3 powerful strides. His hands were already reaching for her throat, fingers spread wide like talons. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across his face, making his expression even more terrifying. Behind him, students began to realize what was happening. Chairs scraped and voices rose in panic. But Sarah wasn't the same person who had walked into this classroom that morning. The mild-mannered biology teacher had vanished, replaced by the warrior she had once been. Her posture shifted subtly but significantly. Her center of gravity lowered, her feet found their optimal spacing, and her hands moved to defensive positions with fluid precision. Marcus launched himself forward with the full force of his athletic build. He had played varsity football for 3 years and possessed the raw strength of youth fueled by adrenaline and fury. His momentum carried him like a human missile toward his target. In his mind, this was the moment he would finally release all his pent-up rage and frustration. The attack came with the speed and violence of a lightning strike. Marcus's hands shot forward, aiming for Sarah's slender neck. His plan was simple and brutal: grab, squeeze, and overpower before she could react. He had height and weight advantages plus the element of surprise. In his twisted logic, this should have been easy, but as his hands closed the final inches toward their target, something extraordinary happened. Sarah's SEAL training didn't just kick in. It exploded into action like a dormant volcano suddenly erupting. Every reflex, every technique, every survival instinct that had been drilled into her during the most elite military training in the world activated simultaneously. Marcus's hands were mere inches from Sarah's throat when she moved with the precision of a surgeon and the speed of a striking cobra. Her left hand shot up and caught his right wrist in a grip that felt like a steel vise. Simultaneously, her right hand intercepted his left wrist with equal force. The impact sent shockwaves of pain up his arms. The collision of their opposing forces created a moment of perfect stillness. Marcus found himself frozen in mid-attack, his hands trapped just short of their target. His eyes widened in shock and confusion. This wasn't how he had imagined this moment would unfold. The small teacher he had expected to easily overpower had somehow stopped his assault cold. Sarah's grip on his wrists was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Her fingers found pressure points with surgical accuracy, sending lightning bolts of pain through his nervous system. The strength in her small hands seemed impossible, as if she had channeled some supernatural force. Her thumbs pressed against specific points on his wrists that made his fingers go numb instantly. Around them, the classroom had erupted into chaos. Students screamed and scrambled toward the exits, knocking over chairs and dropping books in their panic. Some pulled out phones to call for help, while others stood frozen in shock. The orderly learning environment had transformed into a scene from a nightmare in the span of seconds. But Sarah remained perfectly calm at the eye of this storm. Her breathing stayed controlled and steady despite the intense physical confrontation. Her military training had prepared her for far worse situations than this. She had faced armed insurgents in hostile territories, survived firefights in urban warfare, and completed missions that would have broken most people. One angry teenager, no matter how strong or determined, was manageable. Marcus struggled against her grip, his face reddening with effort and frustration. He had expected to overwhelm her quickly, but instead found himself completely neutralized. Her holds weren't just preventing his attack, they were causing significant pain. Every movement he made to break free only resulted in more discomfort as she adjusted her pressure points accordingly. The realization began to dawn on Marcus that he had made a terrible mistake. This wasn't just any teacher. The woman holding him with such effortless control clearly possessed skills and training far beyond anything he had encountered. Her calm demeanor in the face of his violent attack was perhaps more unnerving than if she had screamed or panicked like he expected. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of someone accustomed to command. Her tone was firm but not angry, controlled but not cold. She spoke directly to Marcus while maintaining her painful grip on his wrists. Her words carried the weight of absolute certainty, the kind that comes from facing life-or-death situations. "Stop struggling and listen to me carefully," she said. Her voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow audible over the classroom commotion. "You're going to take 3 deep breaths, and then we're going to talk about what's really bothering you." Her eyes never left his face, reading every micro-expression with the skill of someone trained to detect deception and assess threats. Marcus's rage began to crack under the steady pressure of her gaze and the reality of his situation. The pain in his wrists was becoming overwhelming, but more importantly, something in her voice reached through his anger. It wasn't fear or aggression he heard, but something unexpected, genuine concern. This wasn't the reaction he had anticipated from his intended victim. Principal Johnson burst through the classroom door with 2 security guards, having been alerted by students who had fled the scene. They stopped short when they saw the tableau before them. Marcus, the school's star linebacker, was being held completely immobile by Sarah Martinez, who looked as composed as if she were conducting a normal lesson. The contrast was striking and confusing. "Ms. Martinez, are you all right?" Principal Johnson called out, his voice tight with concern and confusion. He had known Sarah for 3 years but had never seen this side of her. The transformation was so complete it was almost like looking at a different person entirely. Her posture, her presence, even her facial expression had changed fundamentally. Without releasing her hold on Marcus or breaking eye contact with him, Sarah responded calmly. "We're fine here. Marcus and I are just having a discussion about stress management and healthy ways to express frustration." Her words were carefully chosen, offering the young man a path back from the precipice he had thrown himself over. The security guards moved to intervene, but Sarah held up her hand in a subtle stop gesture. Her military experience had taught her that de-escalation was often more effective than force. Marcus was already neutralized physically. Now she needed to reach him psychologically before this situation escalated beyond repair. She could feel the tremors in his arms as his adrenaline began to fade. "Marcus," she continued in that same steady voice. I know you're not really angry at me. Something else is eating at you, and you chose me as a target because I was convenient. But this isn't who you really are. Her grip loosened slightly, testing his response while remaining ready to restrain him again if necessary. Tears began to form in Marcus's eyes as the full weight of his actions crashed down upon him. The rage that had consumed him for weeks finally began to crack, revealing the frightened and overwhelmed young man beneath. His breathing became ragged, but not from anger anymore. The realization of what he had almost done, what he had tried to do, hit him like a physical blow. Sarah recognized the shift immediately. She had seen this transformation before in combat zones, when enemy combatants realized they were defeated. The moment when fight or flight gave way to the crushing weight of consequence and regret. Her grip on his wrist softened further, but she remained ready to react if his emotional state swung back toward violence. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. I don't know what happened. Everything's been so wrong lately. My parents, college rejections, everything falling apart. I felt like I was drowning and needed someone to blame. His confession poured out in broken sentences, each word seemingly torn from deep inside his chest. The classroom had mostly emptied except for Principal Johnson, the security guards, and a few students who remained pressed against the back wall in shock. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting the same sterile glow they had minutes earlier when this had been just another biology class. But everything had changed in those few moments of violence and restraint. Sarah slowly released Marcus's wrists completely, her hands moving in a deliberate and non-threatening manner. She stepped back slightly but remained within reach, her body language shifting from defensive to supportive while staying alert. Her military training emphasized the importance of maintaining awareness even after a threat appeared neutralized. Marcus, look at me, she said gently. When he raised his eyes to meet hers, she continued, what you're feeling is real and valid, but what you tried to do could have destroyed your entire future. You're 18 years old with your whole life ahead of you. Don't let a few terrible months define the next 60 years. Principal Johnson approached cautiously, his radio crackling with reports from other staff members who had heard about the incident. The school's crisis protocols were already in motion, but this situation had evolved beyond what any manual could have prepared them for. The way Sarah had handled both the physical threat and the emotional aftermath was unlike anything he had witnessed. We need to call the police and your parents, Principal Johnson said to Marcus, his voice mixing authority with genuine concern. But Ms. Martinez is right. How we handle this next hour will determine whether you're remembering this as the worst day of your life or the day you got the help you needed. 3 months later, Marcus sat across from Sarah in her now familiar classroom during his lunch period. The same desks were arranged in neat rows, the same biology posters decorated the walls, but the atmosphere was completely different. What had once been a place of violence and trauma had become a sanctuary of healing and growth. The aftermath of that October day had been complicated, but ultimately transformative for everyone involved. Marcus had been arrested and charged with assault, but Sarah's testimony about his emotional state and her recommendation for treatment instead of punishment had influenced the court's decision. He received probation, mandatory counseling, and community service hours that he completed at the school. Sarah had been investigated by the school board and praised by law enforcement for her handling of the situation. Her military background, which she had kept private for 3 years, became public knowledge. The revelation that their mild-mannered biology teacher was a decorated Navy SEAL had shocked the entire school community and earned her respect she had never sought. How did you know I wouldn't actually hurt you? Marcus asked during one of their weekly conversations. These talks had become a routine part of his rehabilitation, though they had evolved from mandated check-ins to genuine mentorship sessions. His anger had been replaced by curiosity about the woman who had saved him from himself. Sarah smiled, the same kind expression she had worn while teaching about neurons that fateful day. I didn't know for certain, but my training taught me to look beyond the immediate threat to understand what was really happening. You weren't a terrorist or an enemy soldier. You were a kid in pain who made a terrible choice in a moment of desperation. The conversation was interrupted by other students entering the classroom for after-school tutoring. Many of them were friends of Marcus who had witnessed the incident. Their relationships with him had been strained initially, but seeing his genuine remorse and effort to change had gradually rebuilt those bonds. The entire experience had matured the whole class in ways no textbook ever could. Marcus stood to leave, gathering his books with the same care he now applied to all aspects of his life. The counseling sessions had helped him develop coping strategies for stress and anger. His parents had reconciled during family therapy sessions, and he had been accepted to community college for the spring semester. The future that had seemed impossible that October morning was now full of possibility. As he reached the door, Marcus turned back to Sarah one final time. "Thank you for not giving up on me when everyone else would have." His words carried the weight of genuine gratitude and the wisdom that comes from narrowly avoiding a life-destroying mistake. Sarah nodded, watching him walk down the hallway with confidence instead of the slouched posture of defeat he had carried for so long. Her SEAL training had prepared her for many challenges, but perhaps none more important than the split-second decision to see a troubled student instead of just a threat. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with compassion, and the refusal to let someone's worst moment define their entire story.